Welcome to TOCHI Stories. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on post notification because it will mean the whole world to me. Now let's get right into the story. Brace yourself. The sky was bright, the breeze gentle, and laughter filled the air as guests gathered for the grand community anniversary. Adora had arrived quietly, as she always did, dressed in a modest but elegant wine-colored dress, her figure glowing from motherhood, her smile radiant with peace. Her two children, a boy and a girl, identical in charm and beauty, clung happily to her side. She stood with her husband, Chuka, a tall, broad-shouldered man with calm eyes and a presence that turned heads even without trying. They blended naturally into the celebration, exchanging greetings and taking pictures with other families. All eyes admired Adora's graceful transformation, especially those who once pitied her. They now envied her. But the moment shifted when a black SUV pulled up, its horn tooting arrogantly. Stepping out in full makeup, a flashy designer gown and a proud belly, Selena strutted in like a celebrity. Behind her was Desmond, Adora's ex-husband, dressed in a gold-colored kaftan, puffing his chest and surveying the crowd like a returning king. They were not invited, they came to be seen. Selena clutched Desmond's arm and whispered just loud enough for nearby ears to catch. "Hope your ex is here. I want her to see what a real woman looks like. You didn't waste your seed on a dried well." She laughed shamelessly, rubbing her stomach for effect. Desmond smirked, trying to hide his discomfort at her crude words, but pride and ego wouldn't let him retreat. They walked in with exaggerated confidence, pretending to greet people, but their eyes were sweeping the crowd for one face, Adora's. It didn't take long. When Desmond finally saw her, his breath hitched. The woman standing before him didn't look like the broken, barren figure he left behind. Her beauty had ripened with elegance, and the twins beside her. Their resemblance to her was undeniable. He blinked hard, frozen, while Selena kept speaking, unaware that his entire spirit had just been cracked in two. The boy looked about a year and a half. The girl, the same. Twins. Real, beautiful twins. Selena spotted the children and scoffed. "I hope they're adopted. Because if she actually gave birth, then I must be dreaming." But Desmond had gone silent. Every cruel word he had once said to Adora about her womb, her family, her worth, returned to haunt him like thunder. Adora turned gently, meeting his eyes. There was no anger in her look, no malice, just peace. That was what cut the deepest. She had healed, and he hadn't. She gave a small nod, looked away, and bent down to help her son tie his shoe. Chuka placed his arm around her waist protectively, smiled at the twins, then whispered something into her ear that made her laugh softly. Desmond's eyes filled with something between pain and disbelief. He had expected to find her crawling through life, miserable and alone. Instead, she was flourishing. And just like that, his victory march turned into the slow, bitter beginning of his greatest regret. Before all the pain and betrayal, there was a time when Desmond saw Adora and felt the world slow down. It was at a church community outreach. She was dressed in a simple Ankara gown, sweat on her brow as she handed out food packs to children. He stood from a distance, captivated by how she wiped the faces of crying babies and gave away her own lunch to an old woman. She didn't see him at first. He watched for nearly 20 minutes, something shifting inside him. Desmond was a man used to expensive things, fine women, and flashy attention, but nothing about Adora fit that mold. And yet, something about her felt like peace, like home. When he finally approached, Adora offered a tired smile, thinking he was just another man coming to flirt. But Desmond wasn't playing games. He asked her name, and when she said Adora, he repeated it like a prayer. "I want to know more about you," he said. Adora laughed and told him she had work to do. That was the beginning of everything. He began to pursue her the next day, sending a small box of snacks to her office with a handwritten note, "For the woman who feeds others even when she's hungry." Adora was touched but cautious. Desmond was a rich man from a proud family, and she was just a tailor's daughter trying to make ends meet. She worked 2 jobs, one as a secretary during the day and another as a typist at night to support her younger siblings and their ailing mother. She had no time for men, especially not those who lived in a world she couldn't understand. But Desmond was relentless. He would sit in front of her mother's house just to see her after work, buy food for the entire family, and leave her handwritten notes about how much he admired her strength. He wasn't charming with words alone, he showed her in actions. One day, after her mother collapsed, Desmond paid the hospital bill in full before Adora could even finish begging neighbors for help. That was when her walls began to fall. After a year of persistence, kindness, and emotional investment, Adora said yes to Desmond. He asked her to quit her night job and promised she would never suffer again. "I want you to be my peace, and I'll be your fortress," he said the night he proposed. Adora cried, overwhelmed by the kind of love she thought only existed in movies. She resigned from her jobs and moved into his house after their wedding, leaving behind the old, cracked apartment she had shared with her family. Desmond gave her access to his cards, filled her wardrobe with designer clothes, and took her on vacations she never imagined. Everyone called her lucky. They praised Desmond for picking from the gutter and turning her into gold. But Adora never saw herself as rescued. She believed she was building a life with someone who respected her. She poured everything into their marriage, her body, her prayers, her soul. But life, as she would soon learn, does not always repay love with love. Adora's joy was complete when she saw the 2 red lines on the pregnancy test. She screamed with joy, running barefoot through the house, until Desmond came running. He lifted her into the air, spinning her and shouting, "You'll be the mother of my children." The excitement was real. Desmond began buying baby clothes that same week and insisted they travel to Dubai for a baby moon. Every morning, he kissed her belly and called their unborn child my legacy. Adora soaked in every moment like sunlight after a long rain. She believed they were becoming stronger as a couple, that her sacrifices were paying off. But in the second trimester, one quiet morning, she felt a sharp pain and collapsed in the bathroom. By the time she was rushed to the hospital, the doctor told her she had lost the baby. She stared at the ceiling, numb, unable to cry. Desmond stood beside her, his hands on his waist, breathing heavily like the pain was his. But he said nothing, not a word, not even sorry. They returned home to silence. Desmond no longer kissed her goodnight. He stopped praying with her. The baby room they had decorated together was locked. She told herself he was grieving differently. She begged him to talk to her, to go for counseling, but he brushed her off with, "Just rest. I need peace." Adora carried the guilt alone, burying her tears in her pillow every night while pretending to smile during the day. Then came a second pregnancy 6 months later. She was cautious this time, praying constantly, reducing her movements, even fasting. Desmond seemed slightly happier, but still cold. Unfortunately, tragedy struck again. Another miscarriage. This time, Desmond exploded. What kind of woman loses children back to back? "What did I marry?" Adora sobbed, trying to explain what the doctor said about stress and trauma. But Desmond didn't care. His love had changed. He began avoiding her completely, choosing late nights out, sleeping in the guest room, and keeping his phone locked. It wasn't long before Adora noticed the presence of another woman. Lipstick on his shirt, perfume that wasn't hers, hotel receipts in his drawer. One day, he didn't come home. When he returned 3 days later, he said bluntly, "I stayed with someone who respects herself and knows how to treat a man." Adora fell to her knees, asking, "What happened to us, Desmond?" He looked at her with eyes she no longer recognized and replied, "You happened." That was the night everything changed. He started bringing Selena around, first in secret, then openly. The woman was flashy, loud, and cruel. She would call Adora Baron in front of the house staff. Desmond never corrected her. One evening, during a heated moment, Selena slapped Adora and spat on the floor, saying, "You're a witch. That's why your womb is cursed." And Desmond simply walked away like nothing happened. That night, Adora curled into herself on the cold kitchen floor, holding her stomach, mourning the children she had lost, and the man she no longer knew. The day the divorce papers came, Adora didn't cry. She had already cried everything out. Desmond walked into the house like a landlord handing an eviction notice to a squatter. "You'll get your settlement. Pack and go. I've wasted enough time with you," he said, not even looking her in the eye. Adora stared at the man she once prayed for, the man she once trusted to protect her heart, now treating her like an object to discard. When she asked him what she did wrong, he said, "Your family is cursed. I should have known better than to marry someone from poverty and misfortune." Those words burned like acid. It wasn't just betrayal anymore, it was humiliation. Her whole life had been poured into that marriage. She gave up her career, her independence, her time, her dreams, and now she was being thrown away like trash. With no money, no children, and nowhere to turn, she packed what little she had left and walked out of the mansion that had become a prison. She moved back into her mother's small house in the slums. The neighborhood buzzed with gossip. Women she once fed now whispered behind her back. She thought she arrived. "Now see her," they muttered. Adora took up small cleaning jobs just to feed herself. There were days she only had one meal. Some nights she went to bed on an empty stomach. But worse than the hunger was the shame. She avoided mirrors because her eyes were too swollen, her face too hollow. But somewhere in her silent suffering, strength began to grow. She started writing in a small diary every night, not because it would change her past, but because it gave her voice when the world had silenced her. One entry read, "They left me empty." But maybe emptiness is the space God uses to pour in new blessings. She didn't know how or when, but something inside her refused to die. Then came the rainy day that would change her life forever. She had just closed her makeshift stall, where she sold boiled corn and groundnuts. Her wrapper was soaked, and her feet were blistered. As she sheltered under an abandoned shed, a car stopped nearby. A man stepped out, holding an umbrella. "May I wait here too?" he asked with a kind smile. That was how she met Chuka. He was quiet, but attentive. His eyes carried both pain and gentleness. He didn't ask about her situation, not yet. He simply kept showing up, buying from her, talking about little things, until one day he said, "You're a woman of strength. Do you know that?" No one had said that to Adora in years. And for the first time, her smile wasn't forced. It was real. She had no idea then that this man would not only become her husband, but the father of the twins that would change her story forever. Chuka was unlike any man Adora had ever known. He didn't come with loud promises or extravagant gifts. He didn't try to impress her with wealth or flashy words. He simply showed up, consistently and gently. Every evening, after his tech company meetings, he would stop by her small roadside stall to buy roasted corn or boiled plantains. While others mocked her for selling food after living in a mansion, Chuka never once looked at her with pity. He treated her with the same quiet dignity as if she were a queen. At first, Adora thought he was just being kind. But when he began helping her set up her stand without being asked, when he brought her herbal balm for her aching back, and when he walked her home in the rain without worrying about his shoes, she began to see that he was not just kind, he was intentional. He was watching her carefully, learning her fears, her boundaries, her pain. One evening, as they sat outside under the stars eating roasted groundnuts, Chuka gently asked her what her dreams used to be, before marriage, before the heartbreak. It was a question no one had ever asked her. Adora found herself opening up about her childhood dream of starting a foundation for women who lost pregnancies, her passion for children, and how she once hoped to become a counselor. She caught herself midway, laughing bitterly. Those were foolish dreams. I was just a tailor's daughter who flew too close to the sun and got burned. But Chuka didn't laugh. He looked at her with a depth she couldn't describe and said, "No dream is foolish if it was born from love. The mistake wasn't your dream. The mistake was trusting someone who didn't see your worth." Those words stayed with Adora for days. For the first time since her divorce, she began to hope again. Not for love, but for herself. Months passed, and Chuka's presence became a gentle constant. He never pressured her, never crossed boundaries. But his silence spoke volumes. Every time she cried, he listened. Every time she laughed, he laughed too. Eventually, he introduced her to his younger sister, a lively seamstress who helped Adora reopen her tailoring skills in a small shed Chuka paid for. "Let's start small," he said. "Just to remind you that you still have purpose." The business grew slowly, but the joy it brought Adora was priceless. She no longer felt useless. She was rebuilding. One evening, as they closed the shop together, Chuka turned to her and said, "I know you've lost a lot, but I want to be part of what you gain next. I want to walk with you, not ahead of you, not behind you, but beside you." Adora couldn't hold back the tears. This man wasn't promising the world. He was promising presence. And for a woman who had been abandoned so many times, that meant everything. Their courtship was quiet, deeply rooted in friendship and mutual healing. Chuka didn't push Adora to move fast. He respected her scars and gave her the freedom to rediscover herself at her pace. They spent afternoons planning simple dreams, a tailoring school, a children's reading club, a small bakery for her mother. Slowly, the darkness that had clouded Adora's heart began to lift. She started smiling without fear of judgment. Her laughter returned, soft at first, then loud and full. Her neighbors, who once mocked her, began to greet her with newfound respect. She was no longer the broken woman who was thrown out. She was becoming whole again. One Sunday, after service, Chuka took her hand and walked her to a quiet spot near a stream. There, under a mango tree, he knelt down and said, "Adora, I know your heart has been wounded. I won't ask you to forget your past. I only ask to be your future. Will you marry me?" Adora said yes through tears. Not because she was desperate for a man, but because Chuka had shown her that love was still possible, that kindness still existed, and that her story didn't end with the pain. Their wedding was a simple, beautiful affair. No media attention. No flamboyance. Just joy. Her mother wept with happiness. Chuka's family welcomed her with open arms, and Adora walked down the aisle with a heart that had been broken, rebuilt, and now restored. Chuka gifted her a key to a new apartment, small but tastefully furnished. "This is your new beginning," he said, placing the key in her palm. That night, Adora stood on the balcony, staring at the city lights and whispered, "Thank you, God, for not forgetting me." It was her moment of peace after a long, turbulent storm. 3 months into the marriage, Adora found herself unusually tired, always craving pepper soup, and falling asleep during sewing sessions. Her mother teased her, "You don't need a doctor to tell you what I'm already seeing." With a shaking hand, Adora took a pregnancy test. Positive. She sat on the bathroom floor, stunned. When the doctor later confirmed not just one heartbeat, but 2 twins, Adora broke down completely. Chuka knelt beside her, holding her while she cried. "I thought I would never be a mother," she whispered. He held her tighter and replied, "You're not just going to be a mother, you're going to be a great one." Her pregnancy was closely monitored. Chuka supported her every step of the way. When the twins finally arrived, a boy and a girl, strong and healthy, Adora held them in her arms and named them Chisholm, "God accompanies me," and Chittybeer, "God is merciful." And in that moment, every tear, every pain, every humiliation she had ever endured faded. Meanwhile, Desmond's world wasn't quite as golden as he expected. At first, Selena had seemed like everything Adora wasn't: flashy, bold, sexy, outspoken, and unapologetically demanding. She took him to parties, wore scandalous dresses that turned heads, and posted their private moments online. For a while, Desmond felt like the man again. His friends praised his upgrade, saying he had escaped the chains of a village girl. But it didn't take long before the fantasy began to crack. Selena was everything he thought he wanted, until he realized she was also everything he couldn't manage. She spent his money like water, demanded constant attention, and had no sense of humility. Where Adora once cooked with love and prayed for him, Selena ordered food in and cursed if the delivery was late. She criticized his clothes, his taste, his friends, even his mother. And unlike Adora, Selena wasn't afraid to insult him in public when he didn't meet her demands. Desmond soon found himself drained, emotionally, financially, and mentally. The sex that once excited him became exhausting. He began to dread going home. But Selena had a hold on him. She was now pregnant, and that meant he was tied to her. One night, during a heated argument over a luxury car she demanded, Selena shouted, "I'm not your ex. I won't manage rubbish. If you're broke, go back to that barren beggar you left." The words hit like poison. Desmond felt a sting of shame he couldn't admit out loud. The same woman he had allowed to mock Adora now mocked him. But pride wouldn't let him confess his regret. He swallowed his bitterness and tried to act like he was still in control, even though he wasn't. Deep inside, the image of Adora haunted him. Her soft voice, her patient heart, her willingness to love him through hardship. He began to wonder if he had truly lost something priceless while chasing shadows. One morning, while scrolling through social media, Desmond stumbled upon a photo from a friend's page. There she was, Adora, dressed in a fitted white gown, standing beside a tall, handsome man, and holding two toddlers in her arms. Desmond dropped his phone. His chest tightened. The twins were beautiful. His ex-wife's smile glowed on their faces. He zoomed in, hoping they were borrowed children. But something in the photo told him otherwise. Adora wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. And the man beside her wasn't just a partner. He was present, proud, and protective. Desmond felt something twist inside him, not just jealousy, but shame. For the first time, he saw the full picture. He had traded a woman of value for a temporary thrill. And now, life was showing him exactly what he had missed. It began as Selena's idea, the grand appearance. She was heavily pregnant now, and she needed the world to see that she had finally given Desmond what Adora couldn't. "I want to show that I've done what your barren wife failed to do in years," she said, flipping through invitations for a community anniversary that Desmond's uncle had sent out. "We're going to that event. We'll make an entrance. I want her to see me, Desmond. I want her to feel what real shame looks like." Desmond, though tired and silently drowning in regret, nodded without protest. He lacked the energy to argue. His world was no longer his own. Selena controlled everything now. Her temper, her demands, her manipulation, they had grown unbearable. But his pride wouldn't allow him to admit he was wrong. Somewhere deep inside, he thought maybe seeing Adora broken would soothe his guilt. Maybe if she was still suffering, he could feel justified. Maybe. They arrived at the event in grand fashion. Selena wore a silk red gown that clung tightly to her swollen belly. Her makeup was thick, her heels tall, and her perfume overwhelming. She clutched Desmond like a trophy, her loud voice cutting through conversations. Heads turned, some out of curiosity, some in disgust. But Desmond's eyes scanned the crowd, searching for Adora. And when he saw her, everything stopped. She was standing near the stage, dressed in a soft green gown that complemented her glowing skin. Her hair flowed like silk, her smile calm and effortless. Beside her stood a man, tall, confident, holding one of the twins while the other clung to her leg. The children were strikingly beautiful, their joy infectious. Desmond's breath caught in his throat. His eyes darted back and forth, the children, her husband, her peace. It hit him with brutal force. Adora wasn't just surviving. She had healed. She had moved on. And she had been blessed. Selena noticed the pause and turned to Desmond. "What? Don't tell me that's her." Desmond nodded slowly, his mouth dry. "With twins," she snapped. "You told me she was barren. You said she couldn't carry children." Desmond didn't answer. He couldn't. Selena's eyes narrowed as she took in the scene, the matching outfits, the way the crowd smiled at Adora's family, the aura of dignity around her. "I said we came to mock someone," Selena said through clenched teeth, "but clearly we're the clowns." She stormed off, dragging Desmond behind her. But he didn't move quickly. He remained frozen, watching as Chuka bent and kissed Adora's forehead while the twins giggled and played. The image branded itself onto his soul, a reminder of everything he once had, everything he threw away, and everything he would never get back. Desmond sat in silence for hours after the event. Back home, Selena raged about how humiliating it was, how he lied to her, how he made her look like a fool in front of his family. She cursed, she screamed, she threw a glass across the room, but Desmond barely blinked. Her voice faded into the background. His mind was still at the event, still watching Adora's soft laughter as her children clung to her legs. The sound haunted him. The smile haunted him. He remembered how she used to smile at him that way. He remembered how she once cooked for him while humming, how she rubbed his feet after long days, how she prayed over his head when he slept. And he remembered, with shame, how he'd tossed it all aside like garbage. Not because she changed, but because he didn't value what he had. The weight of that realization was heavier than he expected. The next day, Desmond called an old friend who used to work at the hospital where Adora had been treated. "Those miscarriages, were they really your fault?" he asked, his voice cracking. The friend sighed. "Desmond, those miscarriages weren't her fault. The first one was stress-related, and the second was due to an undiagnosed condition that was treatable. But she never followed up because she was emotionally exhausted." Desmond dropped the phone. Guilt gripped his chest like iron chains. He had blamed her for something that wasn't her fault. He had allowed another woman to spit in her face. He had walked away at her lowest, convinced she was the problem, when in truth she had only ever loved him. It was he who was flawed. It was he who had failed. That evening, he sat in his car outside Adora Street, watching from a distance. He saw her walk out with her twins, laughing as they held each other's hands. She looked free, fulfilled, beautiful. He thought about approaching her, about asking for forgiveness. But what would he say? That he was sorry for choosing lust over loyalty? That he regretted letting another woman call her names while he stood aside? That he missed her? That he was miserable? No, he had no right. Not anymore. He watched as Chuka appeared and scooped up one of the twins with ease. Adora leaned into him, laughing again. Desmond clenched the steering wheel. She was loved, fully and truly. And it wasn't him who gave it to her. For the first time in his adult life, Desmond wept without pride. And there, alone in his car, he finally admitted what his ego had refused to confess. "I lost a treasure I didn't deserve." Life with Selena grew more unbearable after that event. She was no longer pretending to be sweet or seductive. The mask had fallen. She barked orders like a general, threw tantrums if Desmond didn't meet her financial expectations, and accused him of being obsessed with Adora anytime he went quiet. "Maybe I should go and marry that woman for you," she shouted one afternoon, heavily pregnant, as she flung a plate of jollof rice against the wall. Desmond said nothing. He had lost the will to argue. The house that once felt like paradise now felt like a cage. Every corner echoed with regrets. He barely recognized himself anymore, a man living under constant tension, surrounded by luxury but starved of peace. The irony was bitter. He had mocked Adora for being from a poor background. But that poor woman had given him more peace than this lavish disaster he now lived with. Selena was controlling, manipulative, and emotionally volatile. She demanded expensive wigs, private massages, a new phone, and weekly spa visits, all from Desmond's pocket. And if he delayed, she threatened to leave with the baby. But Desmond had started to wonder if he even cared. One night, while lying awake beside her snoring body, he whispered to himself, "This is the woman I chose." It wasn't just Selena's fault. It was his too. He ignored every red flag. He laughed when she mocked Adora. He encouraged her cruelty. And now he was reaping it. What hurt more was that his family had turned their backs on him. His mother, who once adored Adora, had stopped visiting. His siblings barely picked his calls. Even his business was declining. Contracts weren't flowing the way they used to. He had fallen, not financially yet, but emotionally and spiritually. He was broken in all the places Adora once held together. And across town, in a house filled with love and laughter, Adora sat with her children on her lap and her husband beside her. Chuka massaged her shoulders as they planned a small party for the twins' second birthday. "I wish your father could see you now," her mother said one day, smiling with tears in her eyes. "You've become more than we ever dreamed." Adora smiled. "I wish I could say I got here without pain, but maybe the pain was necessary. Maybe I had to lose everything so I could learn what real love feels like." She looked at her twins, their innocent faces glowing with joy. Then she looked at Chuka, her rock, her reward. And for the first time in years, she felt whole. Truly whole. And as Desmond sat alone in his living room with the television blaring and no one to talk to, he finally realized something he couldn't escape. He had not just lost a woman, he had lost a future that would have saved him. As Adora's twins began to speak their first words and take their first steps, her life blossomed in every direction. Her tailoring business expanded into a small fashion outlet, thanks to Chuka's encouragement and subtle investments. Customers now traveled from across the city to get styled by Madame Adora, the woman with the golden hands and golden heart. She was no longer just a wife and mother, she was a woman reborn. Invitations to speak at women's groups and seminars came flooding in, but she chose her engagements carefully. She had vowed never to chase fame. Peace, for her, was more precious than popularity. Her mother, now healthier and stronger, helped take care of the twins, while Chuka continued to grow his tech company. Their evenings were filled with laughter, storytelling, and soft gospel songs playing in the background. Their home was simple, yet richer than any mansion Adora had lived in before. She had lost everything once, and now everything had found its way back to her, in double measure. Desmond, on the other hand, was living in a nightmare of his own creation. Selena's pregnancy had grown increasingly complicated. Hospital visits became more frequent, her mood swings more dangerous, and her temper more uncontrollable. She refused to eat unless it was from specific restaurants, accused him of cheating, and once destroyed his phone because she found a picture of his mother. "I'm the only woman you should worship now," she screamed, eyes wild. Desmond no longer had the strength to argue. His friends had distanced themselves, tired of hearing the same complaints. His business partners began pulling out of projects due to his inconsistency and stress. The once confident, boastful man now moved like a ghost, bags under his eyes, shoulders hunched, and lips constantly pursed in regret. He would stare at his wedding photos with Adora, remembering her gentle eyes, her prayers, her patience. But all he had now was silence, and the knowledge that he had destroyed his own peace. One particularly cold night, Desmond sat at the foot of his bed, holding a photo from his wedding with Adora. In it, she had been laughing, carefree, trusting, full of life. He hadn't realized then how rare that kind of woman was. His mind replayed the days when she would wake up early just to prepare his favorite breakfast, iron his shirts with love, and wait up for him no matter how late he got home. She never nagged, never demanded, never complained. He remembered the miscarriages, how she had cried herself to sleep and still woke up to greet him with a soft good morning. The guilt hit him like a wave. He knew now, without question, that he had lost the only woman who ever truly loved him. And even though Selena now carried his child, it no longer felt like a blessing. It felt like a sentence. And the worst part? He had no one to blame but himself. Adora walked into a high-end supermarket one afternoon, holding hands with her twins, their excited chatter echoing through the aisles. She wore a casual blue dress and white sandals, her natural curls tied in a soft bun. Her beauty had matured, no longer desperate to impress, no longer timid. She moved with the calm confidence of a woman who had faced storms and survived. As she reached for a pack of cereal, she heard a voice behind her. "Adora." She turned slowly. There, standing a few feet away, was Desmond's younger sister, Kemi, the same woman who had once mocked her for being below their standard. But now, Kemi looked shocked, even nervous. Her eyes flicked to the twins. Are those your children?" she asked, her voice barely steady. Adora smiled. "Yes. My son and daughter. Meet Chisholm and Chitty Beer." Kemi gasped, recognizing their resemblance to her brother. "They're beautiful. You look so happy." Adora nodded. "I am." Word spread quickly through Desmond's family. Adora had twins. She had remarried. She had rebuilt her life. It shook everyone. Some were angry with Desmond for what he had done. Others were simply ashamed. His mother, who once silently supported her son's decision to divorce Adora, now wept privately every time she saw a photo of the twins on someone's phone. "Those were supposed to be my grandchildren," she whispered to her friend. Meanwhile, Desmond was cornered at every turn. His business suffered a major loss due to a failed investment. Selena's demands increased. Her family, now aware of his dwindling wealth, began calling him useless behind closed doors. She refused to give him peace, even threatening to name the child after her ex if Desmond didn't buy her a new car. The pressure mounted. The more Desmond suffered, the clearer it became that he had indeed fallen from grace, and not by accident, but by choice. At night, Desmond would scroll through social media, stalking Adora's page anonymously. He watched videos of her twins dancing, birthday photos, and anniversary posts with Chuka. The captions broke him. To the man who saw value in my broken pieces, or every scar was a pathway to this joy. He knew those words weren't written to hurt him, yet they sliced through his soul. One video in particular shattered him completely. It was Adora's twins singing a birthday song to Chuka, calling him the best daddy in the world. Desmond dropped his phone and screamed. For all the wealth he had lost, for all the shame he now carried. The worst part wasn't losing money or reputation. It was losing a family that could have been his. He had traded a loyal, nurturing woman for a mistress with no depth. And life had handed him exactly what he asked for: emptiness. It all came crashing down 1 week before Selena's delivery. Desmond arrived home late from a business meeting, only to find Selena waiting with her bags packed. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked, alarmed. She threw her diamond bracelet at him. "To my mother's. I'm not raising a child with a man who can't provide the lifestyle I deserve." Desmond's eyes widened. "I've given you everything." "Not anymore," she snapped. "No more cars, no more gifts, no more luxury. You can't even take me shopping without whining. What am I doing here?" The argument escalated. Desmond begged her to stay until the baby arrived. She laughed in his face. "You think I need you? My father will take care of me. You're just a bridge I had to use to get what I wanted: attention, status, and now a child." She walked out, leaving Desmond standing in the doorway, shaking. It was done. The woman he destroyed his marriage for had walked away. He called Selena's father the next day, hoping for mediation. The man didn't mince words. "You allowed your mistress to insult your wife. You divorced the only decent woman you ever had. And now you expect respect for me? No. My daughter has already told us everything. We're done here." The line went dead. Desmond stood there, heartbroken and humiliated. In just 2 years, he had gone from a man envied by all to a man pitied by none. He returned to his empty home, every room echoing with memories. He went to the baby's nursery, untouched, cold, lifeless. There was no crib, no laughter, no warmth, just dust and silence. The reality of his choices crashed over him like a tidal wave. His pride had destroyed him. His lust had deceived him. And now even the child he thought would redeem him was far out of reach. Meanwhile, Adora and Chuka sat in their living room, surrounded by balloons and laughter, celebrating their twins' second birthday. The children danced to their favorite song as guests applauded. Adora's mother wept with joy. "If only your father could see this day," she said. Chuka smiled and wrapped his arm around Adora. "He sees it, and he's proud." Adora looked around her. The home, the joy, the man who stood beside her through everything. Then she looked up and whispered, "Thank you for giving me double for every tear I once cried." She didn't know Desmond was sitting alone across town, watching their joy from a borrowed phone, tears streaming down his face. But even if she had known, it wouldn't have changed anything. Her chapter with him was closed. Her new life had begun. And this time, she was never going to apologize for being happy. The day after the twins' birthday celebration, Adora sat on the veranda, sipping tea while watching her children chase butterflies across the garden. It was a quiet moment, the kind that once felt foreign to her. Chuka came out holding a small bouquet of flowers he had picked himself. "For the queen of this kingdom," he said with a warm smile. Adora laughed, took the flowers, and leaned into his embrace. "Do you know what today is?" she asked. Chuka shook his head. 2 years since my divorce was finalized," she said, her voice calm. 2 years ago, I left that house with nothing. I cried so much that my chest ached. I thought my life was over. Chuka turned her face toward him. You didn't lose your life, Adora. You lost your chains. His words sank deep. It was true. Her pain had been the soil where her new life grew. And now every smile, every step, every hug from her children, it was proof that God had never forgotten her. Later that day, Adora received a call from one of Desmond's old cousins. I don't mean to pry, the woman said, but Desmond isn't doing well. His business is down, Selena left, and he's been asking about you. Adora said nothing at first. The woman continued. He says he wants to apologize for everything. Adora sighed. Not in bitterness, but in resolve. Tell him he doesn't need to find me. I've forgiven him already, but I've also moved on. He made his choice. And so did I. The woman was quiet for a moment, then said, You sound happy. Peaceful. Adora smiled. I am. And I won't trade this peace for anything. After the call, she stared at her reflection in the glass door. The woman staring back was no longer the broken wife who was thrown away like garbage. She was whole, healed, and better for it. Her silence wasn't fueled by revenge. It was the sound of growth. Meanwhile, Desmond sat alone in his dark living room, staring at a framed photo of him and Adora from years ago. She had been smiling in the photo, her eyes lit up with admiration. He remembered that day. She had surprised him with a homemade dinner after he secured a major contract. She had prayed for him. She had cried tears of joy for his success. And what had he done with all of that love? He traded it for a mirage. Now, even that mirage was gone. Selena had blocked him, taken their child to another state, and posted pictures with her new lover, a younger, flashier man. Desmond felt like the walls were closing in. He had tried calling Adora's number, but it was disconnected. He had visited her old address and found nothing. He even waited near her former church, hoping she'd show up, but she never came. Everywhere he turned, it seemed God had hidden her from him. And perhaps, Desmond thought bitterly, that was the true punishment, seeing her happy from afar, knowing he could never be a part of it again. Weeks passed, and Desmond grew more withdrawn. His company was now under review for tax fraud, and former business partners distanced themselves. But the worst punishment wasn't financial. It was the ache in his heart that wouldn't go away. He began writing a letter to Adora. Every night he sat at his desk, pen in hand, bleeding onto paper words he couldn't say in person. I was a fool. I let the world tell me what success looked like, and I chased shadows. You were light, and I walked away. I blamed you for the things I should have protected you from. I allowed another woman to disrespect you, and I stood by. I called your love weakness. I was wrong. So wrong. He wrote 10 pages of apologies, each sentence dripping with sorrow. He imagined her reading it, maybe crying, maybe forgiving him. But each time he finished, he folded the letter and hid it in a drawer. He never mailed it, because deep down he knew he didn't deserve her forgiveness face to face. One evening, he visited the mall where he and Adora once shared their first date. Everything had changed, new shops, new lights, but the memories were clear. He sat at the same table where she once giggled over ice cream, wearing a yellow dress and telling him stories about her childhood. He remembered how she had lit up talking about helping her mother sell akra by the roadside. How proud she was of where she came from. Desmond had once admired that. But somewhere along the line, he began to see her humility as shameful. He thought he needed someone flashier, someone who looked good for photos. He exchanged warmth for vanity, depth for surface, and love for lust. He had chosen image over essence. And now, he sat at that same table with no one to share it with, only the memory of a woman he had once begged to love him. In that quiet moment, Desmond realized that the most painful regrets aren't about what people did to us, but what we did to ourselves. He had destroyed his own home. He had broken his own blessing, and life had moved on without him. Adora didn't need revenge. Her peace was enough. Her growth was enough. Her joy was enough. And Desmond knew he had become the living example of what happens when a man misuses a woman sent to elevate him. As he walked out of the mall, he passed a mother holding her child, her husband placing a kiss on her cheek. He paused, overwhelmed. That could have been him. That should have been him. But it wasn't. And no matter how much he wished to undo the past, it was written in ink, not pencil. It was permanent. Adora stood on stage, speaking at a women's empowerment conference. She wore a fitted African print dress, her natural hair glowing under the lights, her voice calm and commanding. "Pain has a way of birthing purpose," she said. "When I lost everything, I thought it was the end. But sometimes, loss is God's way of removing what's not meant for your destiny." The crowd erupted in applause. She smiled humbly, waved, and walked off stage. Backstage, Chuka was waiting with the twins. "You were brilliant," he whispered, handing her a bottle of water. "You always believe in me," she replied, kissing him softly. That evening, they celebrated quietly at home, reading bedtime stories and dancing with the twins to old high-life music. Every moment now felt like a miracle, not because they had wealth, but because they had peace. Adora had learned to love herself again, and in doing so, she had attracted a love that never made her beg to be seen. Chuka took her aside after dinner and brought out a small velvet box. "I know we're already married, but I never gave you this," he said. Inside was a stunning diamond ring. "You came into my life broken, but you made me whole. This ring is a reminder that love doesn't have to start perfectly to become perfect." Adora couldn't hold back the tears. "I thought I'd never be loved like this," she whispered. Chuka held her hand. "You were always worthy. You just needed someone who saw it." That night, after tucking the twins in, they sat outside watching the stars. Adora placed her head on Chuka's shoulder and said, "If I could speak to the woman I was 2 years ago, I'd tell her, hold on. You're about to witness beauty rise from ashes." They stayed there in silence, a silence filled with healing, redemption, and overwhelming gratitude. Across town, Desmond stared at his dinner alone, untouched. His house was silent. No footsteps, no laughter, no hugs, just cold furniture and empty space. He reached for his phone, typed out a message to Adora. "I see now. And I'm sorry." But he deleted it. She didn't need it. She had already healed. And he had to sit with what he had done. Not out of punishment, but out of reality. Some choices cannot be undone. Some women, when lost, never return. Adora was no longer his to reach. She was a woman restored. And he was just a chapter she survived. It was a warm Saturday morning, and Adora was at her fashion shop adjusting a client's gown when she heard the sound of a familiar voice behind her. It was low, hesitant, and trembling. "Adora," she froze. Turning slowly, she saw Desmond standing at the doorway, holding a bouquet of red roses and an envelope. He looked nothing like the proud man she once knew. His shirt was wrinkled, his face unshaven, and his eyes hollow. Time had humbled him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The shop assistants stopped working, tension thick in the air. "I just wanted to say," Desmond began, voice cracking, "I'm sorry. For everything. For the pain, the abandonment, the shame I brought you." Adora said nothing. She just looked at him, not with hatred, but with indifference. That was when Desmond realized the truth. She no longer held space for him in her heart. He offered the flowers. She gently refused. "You should give those to the woman you chose." "I was blind, Adora. I didn't see your worth until it was too late. I've watched you become everything I always needed, but never appreciated. You didn't deserve what I did to you," he continued, his hands trembling. "I've lost everything. Selena left. My business is in shambles. And every night, I remember how I left you to suffer. I remember the miscarriages, how I blamed you. I remember how I stood by and did nothing when she insulted you." "I know you probably hate me," Adora interrupted, her voice calm but firm. "I don't hate you, Desmond. I've healed. And part of healing is letting go of the bitterness. But I'll never forget. I'll never forget how it felt to be discarded, like I was nothing. I will never forget the nights I cried myself to sleep while you laughed with another woman. I won't forget how you made me feel like I wasn't a real woman because I lost 2 children." She stepped forward, looked him in the eyes, and added, "But I thank you." Desmond looked confused. Thank me? She nodded. Yes. Thank you for walking away. Because if you hadn't, I would never have met Chuka. I would never have discovered that I could be loved so deeply, so patiently. I would never have known that I was worth fighting for. You leaving me was painful, but it was also the beginning of my rebirth. Desmond's shoulders collapsed. The roses fell to the ground, forgotten. He reached into his pocket and handed her the envelope. These are the letters I wrote every night for months. I never sent them. I just wanted you to know that I truly regret everything. She accepted the envelope, but didn't promise to read it. Desmond, she said, her voice softening just a little, I wish you healing. Not so you can get me back, but so you don't destroy the next person you love. With that, she turned away and walked back into her shop. Desmond stood at the doorway for several minutes, then walked away, defeated, but perhaps for the first time, truly changed. Desmond didn't go home after the visit. Instead, he sat at the quiet corner of a local park, holding his head in his hands, letting the shame wash over him like a flood. He thought that seeing Adora again might offer him some form of relief, perhaps a crack of hope. But what he found was finality. She was no longer his. Not emotionally, not spiritually, not even in memory. Her eyes didn't hold longing. They held closure. And that was more painful than hatred. He opened the envelope of his unsent letters, reading through the lines he had written in sleepless nights. You were my peace, and I chose war. You were my light, and I walked into darkness. You were my home, and I burned it down with my own hands. Tears blurred the ink, and Desmond let them fall freely. He didn't care who saw. For the first time in his life, he allowed himself to cry, not from anger, but from regret. As the sun began to set, Desmond remembered a particular day during their marriage, when Adora had made pepper soup after his long day, massaged his feet, and prayed for him. He remembered brushing her off, saying, "Stop acting like my mother." And yet, when things collapsed, it was Adora who had carried the weight. It was she who stayed when others would have walked away. It was she who had believed in him when he didn't believe in himself. He thought about the miscarriages, how she would lock herself in the bathroom for hours, crying in silence, so he wouldn't hear. And what had he done? He had labeled her cursed. He had brought another woman into her home. He had turned her heartbreak into mockery. The weight of it all became unbearable. I don't deserve peace, he whispered to himself. I don't deserve forgiveness. But life has a cruel way of granting clarity, only after it's too late to do anything with it. When he finally returned home, Desmond went straight to his bedroom and opened a photo album that had been buried under books for years. Inside were pictures of him and Adora, on their wedding day, during their honeymoon, holding hands on a quiet beach. The man in those photos looked full of promise. The woman beside him radiated joy. He had destroyed both. That night he didn't eat. He didn't sleep. He sat at the edge of the bed and whispered the same sentence for hours. I'm sorry, over and over, like a man trying to erase a crime written into history. But no matter how many times he said it, the silence in the room reminded him. Some things, once lost, can never be returned. And Adora? She had walked through the fire and emerged gold. He, however, was still standing in the ashes. While Desmond drowned in his guilt, Adora's life continued to bloom. Her tailoring business, now registered as Grace and Threads, opened a second location. She began mentoring young girls from disadvantaged homes, teaching them sewing, etiquette, and the power of inner strength. Newspapers wrote features about her transformation from rejected wife to community leader. Yet, despite the growing attention, she remained humble, always reminding herself of the valley she once crawled through. She didn't share her story to shame Desmond, but to inspire others that brokenness isn't the end. One afternoon, she received a letter from a young woman who had been abandoned after a miscarriage. Reading about you saved my life, it read. Adora folded the letter with trembling hands and cried, not tears of sadness, but of purpose fulfilled. Her pain had not been wasted. It had bloomed into something beautiful, something divine. At home, her twins were growing fast, full of questions, curiosity, and mischief. Chuka was her anchor, always present, always tender. Their love was built on honesty, gratitude, and growth. One Saturday evening, they sat on the balcony watching the sun dip behind the hills. Chuka turned to her and said, "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we hadn't met." Adora smiled and replied, "Then I would still be whole. But I would have missed the joy of loving someone who taught me I was enough all along." They held hands, grateful for the journey, not just the destination. Because what they had wasn't built on fantasy, but on survival, healing, and mutual respect. Their home wasn't just a shelter. It was a sanctuary. And far away, Desmond watched her journey unfold through television interviews and online features. Each time he saw her face, he whispered a blessing for her. He no longer wished to return. He knew he was not worthy of what she had become. But in his heart, he hoped that somehow the heavens would give him peace, not to erase the past, but to survive it. Because some mistakes carry a lifetime sentence. And Desmond? He had finally accepted his. But Adora, the woman once mocked, broken, and cast aside, was now a living testimony that sometimes the people the world throws away are the very ones God chooses to shine the brightest. The day of the Women's Achievement Awards arrived with a quiet excitement. Adora had been nominated for the Woman of Strength and Impact Award, an honor given to women whose stories had inspired transformation in the lives of others. She hadn't expected it. In fact, when the nomination was announced, she laughed and said to Chuka, "Me? Who would have thought the woman who once sold groundnuts and cried herself to sleep would be honored like this?" But Chuka had seen it all along. You don't need a crown to be royalty, Adora. You were a queen the day you chose to rise instead of remain broken. The event was glamorous, held in a grand hall in Abuja, filled with dignitaries, entrepreneurs, and influencers. But when Adora stepped on stage, dressed in a simple but elegant gold gown, there was no performance in her walk, only grace. She held the microphone with steady hands and looked across the sea of faces. "I once believed my story ended when I was thrown away by the person I loved the most," she began. "I was called barren, cursed, and worthless. I believed those words for a while. I allowed them to break me. But then one day, I looked in the mirror and saw someone worth saving. I stopped waiting for apologies. I stopped begging to be chosen. I decided to choose myself." The room fell silent. No one moved. Even the photographers paused, mesmerized by her vulnerability. She continued, "I share my story not to gain sympathy, but to remind someone here that pain is not the end. Sometimes, pain is the classroom where strength is taught. Today, I have 2 beautiful children, a husband who loves me deeply, and a purpose that gives me peace. And I've learned that peace can't be bought. It's not found in money, beauty, or status. It's found in healing, forgiveness, and faith." Thunderous applause followed her final words as she accepted her award with tears running down her cheeks. That night, as they drove home in silence, Adora held Chuka's hand and whispered, "Thank you for not just loving me, but for letting me grow." He turned to her, kissed her fingers, and replied, "You would have grown either way. I just got lucky enough to witness it." At home, the twins had stayed up late with their grandmother, excited to see their mommy's trophy. They jumped up when she walked in, shouting, "Mummy won." Adora scooped them both in her arms, the heavy gold plaque resting against her hip, and laughed until her stomach hurt. Later that night, after the house was quiet and the lights were off, she sat on the balcony, the stars glittering above her, the breeze dancing around her gown. In her heart, she offered one final prayer, not for revenge, not for more success, but for gratitude. "God, thank you. For the fire, for the ashes, for the double blessings, for teaching me that being thrown away isn't the end, it's the beginning." And in another corner of the city, Desmond sat in a small 1-bedroom apartment, watching Adora's speech on a borrowed television. He listened without blinking, his heart heavy, his eyes wet. As she held her twins and smiled, he placed a hand on his chest and whispered, "You deserve it all, Adora. Every joy, every blessing. You were always the better one." He didn't curse her. He didn't feel bitter. Just a quiet acceptance that she was gone, and he had let her go. The screen faded to black, but her voice lingered in his ears. And as he turned off the TV, alone in the quiet, he stood by the window and looked at the moon, the same one Adora had sat under minutes before. Different places, different lives, but both with lessons learned. Hers was a life rebuilt from pain into peace. His was a life defined by choices that couldn't be undone. And as the wind blew through his curtain, he whispered one last thing. Goodbye, Adora. Thank you for loving me. I just wasn't man enough to deserve it. Thank you for watching this video. What did you learn from this story? Drop it in the comments. Please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel TOCHI Stories for more.